Honorable Governor Shri Bharat P. Vanchu, and dear friends, a very good morning to all of you and a warm welcome to our series of lectures by eminent people. Today we have with us Mr. Amber Sen, former Special Secretary, Research and Analysis Wing, Government of India, and Strategic Intelligence Advisor, National Security Council. He will be speaking to us on activities of terrorist groups in our region and beyond. I'm pleased to welcome him and thank him for accepting our invitation to speak on a very significant topic that is of major concern worldwide. I would also like to thank all the participants for sparing their valuable time to be here with us today. Terrorism, as we all unfortunately know, is the unlawful use of force or violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, the civilian population, or any segment thereof, in furtherance of political or social objectives. It targets ethnic or religious groups, governments, political parties, corporations, and media enterprises. It is probably the worst type of crime that ever exists. Not only does it kill people, it destroys livelihoods, economies, and civilized world order that took millennia to form. The results of terrorism are almost always catastrophic. Even though there are other global problems such as pollution, natural disasters, and global warming, terrorism tops all problems with the world we live in today because it is associated with many innocent lives, social issues, as well as retaliation. Despite the world facing a severe economic recession for the preservation and protection of the most fundamental human right to life, the global community, at the expense of economic growth, the cost of economic well-being, and the stake of economic stability, is engaged in an endless war, the infamous global war on terror. In this context, let me introduce to you our speaker today, Mr. Amber Sen. He completed his schooling from Mayo College, Ajmer in 1963, graduated in English Honours from St. Stephen's College, Delhi University, and MA English from also Delhi University. He then joined the Indian Police Service in July 1970. After training at the National Academy of Administration, Mussoorie, and the National Police Academy, Mount Abu, Mr. Sen joined the Cabinet Secretariat, Research Analysis Wing, Government of India, New Delhi, in October 1971. During his 36 years of service with the RAW, he handled Bangladesh, Pakistan, the Middle East, counter-terrorism, and a number of operational desks. He then retired from government service in 2007 and was thereafter re-employed for 2 years with the National Security Council as Strategic Intelligence Advisor. I now welcome him to deliver his lecture, after which I'm sure he'll be delighted to answer a few questions. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency the Governor, Mr. Sai, ladies and gentlemen, I'm of course very grateful to the International Center in Goa for inviting me to speak at this prestigious institute. But I'm overwhelmed by the presence of the Governor, which has taken me by surprise, maybe made me a little more nervous, but I consider it a signal of honor. I'll give you initially a very broad overview of how let me say not just me, but most experts in terrorism view the trends in terrorism. Ever since the US started their campaign against global terrorism by going into Afghanistan in October 2001, there has been considerable success. Mainly the Al-Qaeda, the original Al-Qaeda, let me put it the way, the followers, the original recruits and followers of Osama bin Laden have suffered tremendous attrition in terms of personnel, in terms of resources, in terms of financial resources, and most importantly in terms of their ability to ideologically influence people. Having said that, they are not eliminated. They happen to be fairly strong in a small area in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region, mainly northern Waziristan. Following from that, the key trends, as I said, the core of the Al-Qaeda, the original Al-Qaeda, is crippled with serious attrition to its leadership, capabilities, resources, and its ideological power to influence. It is, however, not entirely decimated and has presence and strength in their stronghold in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Simultaneously with the decline of the core Al-Qaeda, there has been the gradual rise of its allies in Africa and West Asia, West Asia, particularly in the Middle East. Prominent among these allied groups include Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. These incorporated the various other groups which were earlier there in Algeria. Again, for ease of reference, we call them Al-Qaeda in Algeria, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Al-Qaeda in Yemen, etc. Now, as these states like Algeria, Somalia, Sudan, Libya, Yemen, as you all know, have had upheavals, there have been change of governments, there have been failure of state structures. So this has made it easier for these groups to get a little more strength because of the unsettled conditions. The whole region presently is in turmoil, so we have these groups getting a little stronger, particularly in Syria and Libya, as you all know. Things are very, very uncertain. Then we come to North Africa. Is there? If you can, I think there's a map. But you get a little sort of swath of geographical area starting from Afghanistan, Pakistan region, going on to the Middle East and to North Africa region. And have this little sort of line where these terrorist groups are present. Not all of them are operating, but they happen to be there. A third noticeable trend has been the higher profile adopted by groups like the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Haqqani network. The Haqqani network originates from Afghanistan, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, and of course the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. These groups are, of course, again, not entirely separated from the original Al-Qaeda. They share some of the common objectives, the operational resources, and other networks. What is most worrying at present is the networking capabilities of these groups. We have noticed a trend that they don't now care so much about ideology. They'll have different ideologies, but they will use their own resources, each other's resources. There's clear evidence of sharing of resources, methodology, and safe houses and sanctuaries among otherwise different ideological groups. Jamiah Islamiyah, which is originally the Indonesian, for instance, has utilized the training camps of the Lashkar-e-Taiba. They have used Lashkar-e-Taiba safe houses in Pakistan to stay away from counter-terrorism operations against them in their own homeland, that is Indonesia. The Lashkar-e-Taiba has trained Chechen terrorists. 2 Chechens were arrested in Gibraltar last year by the Spanish police, and they were trained with the LET camps in Pakistan. Now again, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, again the Pakistani group, which draws support from the Pakistani diaspora in the UK, has trained a number of British Pakistani terrorist elements. There is estimates that about 20,000 from two dozen, let's call them threat groups, are located in the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, mainly, as I said earlier, in North Waziristan. Africa, particularly North Africa, is now gradually emerging as an epicenter of terrorism. What we call the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic region has expanded from North Africa, and the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb has shared its expertise with a group called the Boko Haram, which is from Nigeria. In November last year, the leader of this group, a man called Abu Bakr Shekau, expressed solidarity with associates of the Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, Iraq, North Africa, Somalia, and Yemen. The rise of new or transitional governments in Egypt, Tunisia, Yemen, and Libya, and the ongoing unrest in Syria and Libya have offered opportunities for established affiliates, aspiring groups, and like-minded individuals to conduct attacks against Western, mainly US interests. For instance, the 2012 attack on the US embassy in Benghazi, Libya, where they killed the US ambassador. And the 2013 attack on Algeria's oil field, which was the In Amenas oil field, where you remember they had taken hostages in the oil field. They were, of course, later on released by the security forces. All these demonstrate the threat from these splinter groups or ad hoc coalitions or individual terrorists who are operating without any official direction or guidance from leaders of the established Al-Qaeda affiliates. One more group which is very active and has the potential to create a lot of problems is what is called the Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Ever since the US forces withdrew from Iraq in 2011, this group has conducted nearly monthly attacks, simultaneous monthly attacks on government facilities, on the security forces, and against Shia targets. This is basically a Sunni group which targets the Shias. Similarly, Al-Qaeda in Iraq's Syria-based network, what is called the Nusra Front, is one of the best organized and most capable of the Sunni terrorist groups. We now come to the Somalia-based Al-Shabaab group. This, of course, is mainly focused on internal upheavals in Somalia. But it has the potential to challenge leaderships in various contiguous areas. And it's at the moment, of course, concentrating on fighting against the Somalian forces and the Ethiopian government forces, and of course the African Union mission, which are also sending troops. While it is in some kind of retreat because of the gradual taking over by established governments, it still has the potential to carry out attacks. I had mentioned Boko Haram earlier, so let me mention a little bit more about it. It's basically a northern Sunni group from Nigeria, and it has ties to the, as I said earlier, to the Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. It is presently indulging in attacks against Christians and also fellow Muslims in Nigeria. They have therefore heightened ethnic and religious tensions and also raised concerns about attacks against Western interests in that country. Now I think I should mention a little bit about, since it is very topical after the Boston Marathon bombing, I think all of you know these two brothers. What is the name? I don't know the name. Dzhokhar, I am not very good at pronouncing it, Dzhokhar Tasranev and Tamilan Sarnev, sorry, this should be Sarnev. They, as you know, came from the Chechen region. And what we have noticed is the neighboring area, Dagestan, which neighbors Chechnya on the east, has been the most sort of disturbed area in the last 2 years or so. It has, Dagestan has approximately 90% of its 2 million population is Muslim. And it has a very small percentage of 8% of ethnic Christians, Russian population which are Christians. And then I have small communities of ethnic Armenian and Georgians. Now they have been trying, the government there has been trying to secularize the system in Dagestan. But Islam is increasingly getting an upper hand, as borne out by the fact that 10 years ago, Dagestan had only 10 mosques. As of now, they have 2,000. There are 2 Islamic universities and 8 Islamic institutes with 12 branches. These brothers, as I read from media reports, were greatly influenced by events in Dagestan. Greatly influenced by these, though they are Chechens, they have been influenced by Dagestan. I think both of them went, or at least one of them went, to Dagestan about 2 years ago. And you must have read in the papers that the Russian intelligence agencies did pass on to the US agencies that these 2 brothers need watching. It's not clear whether the FBI did watch them or didn't have the manpower or the time to waste on them, but obviously they slipped the radar. And if I may mention, since I'm talking about the Boston Marathon, I don't know if all of you know that another attack on a marathon was in 2008 in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka Marathon, just before the start, there was a bomb. There were a lot of casualties. There were death of 12 people and injuries to more than 100. And amongst those killed was the then Sri Lankan Highways Minister. He was there to inaugurate the flag off the marathon. Fernandipul, and a former Sri Lankan Olympic marathon runner called Karunaratne. And since we are talking about bombings and athletic events, I think we should not forget the September 5, 1972 bombing, the attack in the Munich Olympics. Most experts feel that that was probably the most consequential terrorist attack prior to 9/11. A lot of the US at least tries to give the impression that ever since 9/11, they've had a lot of success in preventing further attacks in their homeland, which, if you look at it factually, is not really correct. There have been, since September 2001, there have been at least 3, I know, fairly serious incidents in the US. For instance, the July 28, 2006, this man called Naved Afzal Haq opened indiscriminate fire at the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle, killing 1 and wounding 5. Again, on February 12, 2007, Suleiman Tabovic killed 5 and wounded another 5 at the Trolley Square Mall in Salt Lake City, Utah. And on November 5, 2009, Nidal Malik Hassan, the US Army major, who was a psychiatrist, opened fire in the military base in Fort Hood, Texas, and he killed 4 and injured 23. And moreover, at least 3 other cases did not fructify, not because of any great success by the U.S. intelligence and security forces, but because of the sheer incompetence of the three individual concerns. For instance, you know of these ones, like the December 2001 case of the shoe bomber, Bridget Reed. Then the December 2009, what is called the underwear bomber, that is Umar Abdul Muttalib, and the May 2010 Times Square bomb by Faisal Shahzad. Why I've said this is a lot of times there is comparison between the efforts by the US authorities and the Indian authorities, and somehow our media gets to this conclusion that we have completely failed and the US has completely succeeded. It's not really that's true. You know, there's never any 100% success in that counterterrorism work. It can never be. No matter how good you are, no matter how strong you are, no matter how many people you put on it, how many resources you put on it, there can never be 100% success. You will always have someone or the other, some group or the other slipping through. So you should be prepared for it. If I can come, say for instance, if I can come to the Indian scene, I think it's very positive. The trends, if you go by trends, just by trends, it's pretty positive in India. If I can give you some statistics. Terrorism and insurgency-related fatalities have fallen from a peak of 5,839 in 2001 to 803 in 2012. Now some people will say, it's only just figures, so how does it prove anything? But you have to go on something. You have to go on something. This is a trend, which is a positive trend. Now attacks by Pakistan-backed terrorists were only one in 2012, only one. I mean, outside JNK, that was the one in Pune. In 2011, there were 3 such incidents outside JNK with at least 41 killed. 2008 was, of course, the peak, where the Bombay incident took place, and there were 7 attacks with 364 fatalities, of which 195 were from the Bombay 2611 attack. If I can just touch on a little bit on the surrounding region, let me start by Bangladesh. Again, Bangladesh has had good success, and I think we should give credit to the government led by Sheikh Hasina. It had started spawning a lot of Al-Qaeda linked terrorist groups, like the Hizbul Harkat al-Jihadi Islami and the Jamaat al-Mujahideen in Bangladesh. The last 5 years of the Awami League government, they have really taken a serious and concerted effort against these groups, and they have been successful. And we have gained a lot, as you know. A lot of the northeast insurgent groups took shelter in Bangladesh, had training camps there. The Bangladesh government has attacked all of them, pushed back a lot of them into India, and consequently we've had success in the sense that these groups have started talking to our government. But again, here again, it will be wrong to suggest that terrorism has been rooted out. Extremist groups like the Hizb ut-Tahrir have remained active in urban centers and in the universities. The Hizb ut-Tahrir's influence in the security forces has been a particular cause of worries. They have infiltrated the security forces. And you have noticed that recently when this War Crimes Tribunal pronounced their judgments, there were these huge protests in Bangladesh. And that would give an indication that the Jamaat-e-Islami and these other groups still remain influential. Whether they can translate it into votes in the forthcoming election, Bangladesh will go into general elections soon. that normally the Jamaat-e-Islami has not been very successful in the elections, but it has brought out all these people on the streets. It was a major problem after these judgments were pronounced. Coming to Indonesia, it's been 11 years after the Bali bombing. The Al-Qaeda linked Jamia Islamia remains a disruptive force in the country, which happens to be the largest Muslim population. The Indonesian security forces have had good success in disrupting the Jamia Islamia. But recent events show that the threat from the group and its allies remains strong. In July 2009, for instance, activists of this group bombed some luxury hotels in Jakarta, killing 9 persons. But more significantly, showing that the terrorist group was far from being extinguished. The Jamia Islamia certainly has dipped. As would be evident from the fact of a man called Umair Patek, who was one of their senior leaders. He was picked up a few months before the killing of Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, the same place. And he had gone there to plead for more finances from the Amir. So it's not in good shape, but yet it has the ability to carry out a few attacks. Philippines, another place. It has basically 3 terrorist groups: the Abu Sayyaf group, the Jamia Islamia, again offshoot of the Indonesian one, and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. They have not had any major successes in recent times, but for instance, in January 2012, the Philippines military said it had killed 2 key Jamia Islamia leaders in a raid in the south. Most of the extremist activities in the Philippines is in the south. In the south, 1 Malaysian and 1 local. But the real threat comes from the increasing possibility of Jamia Islamia and the Moro Front joining hands. While the Moro Front has signed a peace deal with the government, it has splintered into many groups, and all these groups do not agree with the peace deal. So, for instance, there's a man called Tato, who has formed a 200-strong group, a new splinter group, and he is strongly opposed to any peace with the government. His group's first attack was a string of attacks on army camps in August last year. If I can just speak a little more on, you would have read recently how the media compared the reaction in Boston and the reaction in India. It may be an unfair comparison, but I think it needs to be noted. For instance, one example was when the Boston police completely shut down the city when they were looking for the surviving brother. And the public cooperated. I mean, Boston is a huge city. They stopped the trains. They asked everyone to stay at home. And the entire population complied. All of you know what happened when 26/11 took place in Bombay. I don't know if anyone from the media is present here. Okay. I'll take the risk. The media was not very good during Bombay. Let me just put it that way. I had left service, but as someone who handled it earlier, I was watching it on TV. I mean, you don't go and give minute-to-minute coverage, which is watched all over the world. So, but let me look at it optimistically. As I told you, the trends, I'm afraid, I will be a little critical of the government also. I mean, setting up these new agencies like the National Counterterrorism Center. In our system, the governor would bear me out. It takes a long time to recruit and go check the backgrounds and get the equipment. So I always feel, why create one more agency when you have an agency which is 40, 50, 60 years old? So strengthen them. Spend the same amount of money in getting more personnel, in getting more equipment. Let me say the IB, I think the IB is short by 20,000, about 20,000 in personnel. The RNAW is short by about 3,000 in personnel. Get all these people. It will take time, yeah, I know, because our system is like that. You go for background checks, you go to the police in the village, it takes about 6 months for the report to come back, then you go do all the clearances, then you put the man in, then you train him, but then you have to start somewhere. I think you said there's some people from the police, you know. I mean, I don't want to lecture you, but you know, counter-terrorism work, of course, there is technical facilities which are very excellent. But I have found that human intelligence can't be beaten at best. But getting them is very, very difficult. If you can penetrate a terrorist group, you are the best intelligence officer. But there are very few who can manage that. So it's a combination of technical intelligence and human intelligence. But I would still say human intelligence scores over technical intelligence. I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your patience, for listening to me.
Thank you very much, and that was a very, very incisive and in-depth kind of a view that we got about terrorism. I'm sure there are many questions that you have.
First of all, thank you very much for your rather comprehensive talk this morning. It's very useful. I'm an ordinary accountant and a commoner, and therefore my interests are therefore very pedestrian. I was a bit concerned, with the greatest respect, however, that you seem to derive some kind of satisfaction from the fact that India's terrorist attacks went down from 5,000 to 800.
No, fatalities.
Sorry? Casualties went down. Even the number of attacks that have taken place in India, I mean, they seem to come with alarming regularity. And the pain that they cause is something that, you know, we all know about. And talking about England, for example, where I've spent most of my life, I mean, since 2005, I can hardly remember an incident that has taken place there. Now, there have been people who have been caught after that, before they've done things. The same thing has happened. I mean, you mentioned Times Square, you mentioned the shoe bomber. But these people, whatever their incompetence or whatever, they were caught before they did what they did. And the number of attacks in America, 3 or 4, doesn't compare with the number of attacks we have in India. So the question that I have in my mind is, what is it in your opinion? I mean, you're a strategic advisor. Oh, you have been. What in your opinion is the reason they happen so often in India as compared to the West? Let's ignore Syria, let's ignore Iraq, as you say yourself, these are unstable countries. Let's ignore them. Let's talk about India and say, at least assume that we are a stable country. Now, if that is so, why are we having so many of them over here?
We have an unstable neighbor. That's what we have.
That's an excuse.
No, it's not an excuse.
No, do we have, as a strategist working with RAW, do you have anything to say on this?
Sahai mentioned you've handled operational desks as, so what is a spy, what is your take as, a former sleuth on the Sarabjit episode?
That, was he a spy or wasn't he? Because he was given a funeral with state honors, etc. So because clearly India is not absolutely innocent and, baby innocence there. RAW also has had operations in Pakistan.
Without being very specific, we are not very innocent.
Absolutely. So the Sarabjit episode, one would think it's either a distraction of the nation from what's happening in the Chinese border, or Sarabjit was a spy of India. Do you have any comment on that?
Normally spies are abandoned, so.
Was that what happened to him?
No, he wasn't abandoned. He was given a state funeral.
He was abandoned before he was given the state funeral.
These are
So
very-
you honestly think this kind of an issue needs to just, rise on them?
Sorry?
Or do you see a need for some kind of clarity on this issue?
I mean, what clarity do you want? What clarity do you want? Let me put it this way. If he was a spy, no one's going to admit it, isn't it? Let's say, put it this way. No intelligence agency admits that there's a spy, that was a spy. It's all over the world. So I know it's not a direct answer to your question.
And the people were working in Afghanistan. So how does or where India look about this new resurgence of a new Al-Qaeda form? That's first question. And second, you did mention about well-known Indian Mujahideen and their networking or their links with Lashkar-e-Toiba or other outfits from Pakistan. So these are the two questions. Okay, and last question just popped in my mind. How do you perceive Al-Shabaab role into growing a new form of terrorism called maritime terrorism? Because Al-Shabaab is more into hijacking most of the cargo ships in Horns of Africa, and they are being assisted by so-called Al-Qaeda or Taliban.
Al-Qaeda in that part of the world.
Yeah, that part of the world. And today that so-called maritime terrorism is coming very close to Indian SEZ or Special Economic Zone, what I would say. And then their hideouts have been identified even in north of Lakshadweep Islands, where they were, Indian Navy caught some of the pirates, and they were so-called pirates, but they have links with Al-Shabaab. So how does RAW, as we talked about, because it's the only institution which guarantees us about external security threats. So how does India see Al-Shabaab connection with maritime terrorism?
This operation has been led by our Navy and Indian Coast Guard actually. But these pirates are basically, I don't think you should mix them up with the ideologically influenced groups. These are basically criminal groups who are doing it for money. And they're taking advantage of the completely unsettled conditions in their country of origin. They're mainly Somalians, isn't it? And Somalia has had enormous problems, and they're trying now to get an established government, but the unsettled conditions provides them the opportunity to do all this. I would classify them as criminals and not as any ideologically inspired groups.
A former Special Secretary of RAW and a strategic intelligence advisor, what do you feel about Goa? Is it a soft target for terrorist groups? We are an international tourist destination. Suppose some terrorist group plants a bomb at a flea market where you have thousands of international tourists. In 1 minute it can make instant news all over the world. So do you think Goa is prepared to counter terrorism?
You have to ask the Goa police, I don't know. But yes, it's I mean, any area which is crowded and which has people from various nationalities is always a very tempting target, because what does the terrorist want? The terrorist wants publicity. He wants to create fear. So what you say is true. I mean, it can always be a very tempting target. I mean, no denying that.
Sir, my name is Mac Patsa. Nothing to do with security. Liquor is my business. A layman, sir. Mrs. Sahai mentioned that Middle East is your forte, an area of, I would like to call it West Asia. One international question and one a little localizer. There's this cliche which says one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Do you think the Palestinian movement is a freedom fighting movement, or are they terrorists? That's one question, sir. The second question, sir, is do you think hate speeches by leaders like OIC or provocations like leaders like Narendra Modi help to mobilize terrorism recruitment?
See, but in what you said about the Palestinian groups, I think they have sort of transformed themselves into sort of acceptable freedom fighters. They were initially, I mean, a lot of people used to wonder whether Arafat should be called a terrorist or a freedom fighter, but ultimately he was accepted as a leader of the movement. About Owaisi, I think he's making pretty strong speeches, which is the reason why he's in trouble. About Mr. Modi, I think I will not answer the question because I hope I can satisfy your.
Mr. Sen, you had earlier, when one of the gentlemen over there who's come from England was talking about the terrorism in India versus the way it is controlled in the US, and he mentioned that one of the essential differences is that in India it's state-sponsored from across the border. Now the Pakistanis, all said and done, we presume are intelligent people. They've been riding the back of a tiger, and I'm pretty sure as intelligent people they know the tiger is about to swallow them up. So what is our perception, our intelligence perception of the honesty of the Pakistanis to controlling that terror, or are they still just giving it lip service? And are they not seized of the problem that's sitting on their doorstep?
You have to keep in mind in Pakistan, the Pakistan army decides foreign policy relating to India and all security policies. For the Pakistan army, India is the one and only enemy. So even if the civilian leadership says we will control the terrorist groups, it's not necessary that the army military establishment will follow that. I think you all know that the military establishment in Pakistan is a power on its own, it's an institute of its own. We are very fortunate that so far, and I think I should give credit to General Kiani, that they have not interfered in the civilian administration. And he has only recently said that the elections will be held as scheduled. And we hope that the Pakistan army will not interfere in it. But as far as controlling these groups which are totally anti-Indian, I mean aimed at India, I am very skeptical that they will do it in the near future.
Another related question, something somebody else asked.
You had made a statement about, the media coverage during that 26/11. Now, that was like a terrible thing to happen, the media coverage, agreed. But, we've had terrorist strikes, experience with this from, I think, the 70s. But what systems have you guys put in place to make certain that we have something approximating the Boston reaction? Now the Boston authorities shut down the city because this is an emergency situation. By inference, your democratic rights are suspended during this operation. What do we have to approximate that? Is there any plan? You are still in the line advising, but is there a master plan? Is there some kind of master plan to, because let's say even if the top brass are, ready for action, what about the local people? What are their roles? Like something like firefighting.
Who dare control the Indian media?
Indian media is controlled as far as I'm concerned.
No, it isn't.
No.
Let's
be serious.
It's a very free media. No, I mentioned about Boston because I was just trying to compare the reaction of the general populace.
True.
I don't know, I don't want to sound critical of my own country, but if it happened in say, Hyderabad or something, would everyone stay at home? Would they have stayed at home? I'm not too sure.
But if there were systems in place where, the police are...
So what systems can you have? You only can have the population following what the authorities have asked you to do.
Correct, but you have curfew
Without questioning.
Without questioning, that is the thing. Is that possible? Do you have any system in place, or maybe a plan to have this?
You can't have a system in place. You just have to have the reaction, the positive reaction of the populace, and let's hope there will be positive reaction. The other thing which, I shouldn't criticize the media, but you know, we have this great tendency before the 12 hours is over, after the incident, we start naming people and we say this one will be the suspect, that one will be the suspect. But how do we know in 6 hours or 12 hours? You can never know in 6 hours or 12 hours. You know, that is what I would request the media not to do. Because it doesn't help. It doesn't help. The police and the intelligence agencies and the investigation agencies need time. They will need time. Now, another incident, you know, in the US and I think also in the UK, they put up that little yellow plastic, whatever, and says police line do not cross. No one crosses. No one crosses. Why? Because after a bomb blast, it is vital to get the evidence on the ground. And if you were to trample over it, that's it. It's gone forever. You'll never find it.
In retrospect, something that the media can be held accountable, in the sense, something like, it's a bad word to use, but this is the closest I can come to, something like a court-martial? No, it can't be done.
Main thing is that it's an incident which has affected the local population. It's a bad incident. So we expect the media to cooperate a bit. That is about it.
This question is a little tangential.
It's not tricky, I hope. It's not tricky, I hope.
No, it's not tricky. When the 26/11 happened in Bombay, if you see the topography of the West Coast, I cannot tell you exactly, but you know from where they started in Pakistan.
Karachi.
Those guys, Karachi. You know the location of Bombay. We have a Coast Guard, we have a Navy. You mean to say that neither of them suspected or saw anything fishy or anything questionable over all this long distance until these people landed at Badwar Park in Bombay?
There's a lot of traffic in that area, isn't it, on the waters?
Traffic is everywhere.
So, and then they came by ship, then they switched to a whatever.
They did everything, and
rubber dinghy. Yeah.
They did everything, and that is what crime is about. And vigilance and prevention should match that situation.
I agree. There was a failure. I'm sure, and the government is really trying. The Coast Guard has been strengthened. We are getting more surveillance aircraft. So let's hope. But our problems are manifold. Let's keep that in mind.
Hello, sir, one last question. After the incidents of 26/11, a lot of vigilance measures were taken, including the vigilance measures, including the installations of CCTVs on the railway stations and all. But sometime back I remember reading that these CCTVs are not functioning. So if the government has spent so much money with somebody's brainwaves and all, but it is not pursued properly, nobody is held accountable if it is not working and all. So is there any system or mechanism which can be set? So otherwise it will become somebody has installed and somebody should have maintained it, but nobody did, anybody could have done it, something like that.
There's the individual competence.
No matter how much the government system they put in place, the individual competence is not there, then what do you do? Accountability.
Can I put that on a humorous note?
Please do.
You know, at around that time, around the people who mattered, there must have been a few weddings, social functions.
A little out of these, yeah.
And funds were needed, so contracts were dished out so that route could be engineered. Now nobody cares whether they work or they don't work. That's all I can say about that.
Let's not be so skeptical.
Can we not retaliate by sending some groups to Pakistan? No, yeah. That's what retaliation.
Will that put an end to terrorism? I don't think. You eliminate a few people.
To create a sort of fear in their mind. There is some
No, I don't think the Pakistanis would get scared so easily.
Thank you very much. I think it's been a very interesting talk as well as an interactive session. I can see there's a lot of interest in this subject, and we thank you all for coming here.